G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds everyone well. Just wanted to show a quick sample edit today from start to finish in Lightroom, and it's basically just a rainforest image that I actually photographed quite recently. It was a bit of an overcast day, so the lighting was really nice and soft for this type of image. No harsh shadows to deal with that would have been outside of the dynamic range of the camera, and what I wanted to do was just create a bit more of a dramatic edit, a little bit more so than what I was thinking at the time of capture. So at the time I thought I'll just capture this image as a good stock image because it's kind of shows the rainforest and also the quality and type of pathway in this particular location. But the more I looked at it, I really liked this highlight coming through on the path and the natural kind of fall off of light in all the other areas of the image. So I thought I'd have a bit of a go of a bit more of a dramatic edit and see what we can come up with. Alright, so we're in the develop module. You can see the settings of the image that I shot there, ISO 50. 17mm. It was on a full frame camera, f8 at 10 seconds. Now, the reason I had those settings, f8 was the sharpest aperture for this particular lens. 17mm was the widest, so I wanted to include as much of the scene as possible. ISO 50, knowing that I was on a tripod, so there was no issue with camera shake, I went for the lowest possible ISO to have the image as clean as possible, and the resulting shutter speed was 10 seconds. So there we go. Alright, let's start the edit process. So what I'm going to do firstly is I just want to bring into control or in a little bit closer to each other the shadows and the highlights. So I'm just going to drop the highlights, increase the shadows a little bit, and actually drop the exposure as well. Mainly because the overall feel and mood of the image, I want to, as I mentioned, create a little bit more of a dramatic edit and just see what we can do. So by reducing the overall exposure, what I'm going to do is have a bit of a shaft of highlight just to go along with the lighting that's actually in this image, so working with the lighting. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a highlight through here. So overall I just want to decrease the exposure a little bit first, and then I'll, with some selective adjustments, bring up this area just above the path there. Alright, I'm just going to increase the contrast a little bit. I'm not going to go too heavy on contrast for this image because I just want to control, again, that highlight and shadow area and bring them as close as possible to each other. I'm just going to put a little bit of clarity and texture in there for now. Now I might come back and revisit that, but for now I just want to add a little bit, and I'm just going to go a little bit of vibrance and saturation. Again, not a huge amount, but just enough to give the quality of the color a little bit more depth and strength for that color intensity. Alright, I'm just going to go back up to my exposure and drop that a tiny bit more. There we go. And I'm going to come down all the way down to detail. I'm just going to apply some sharpening. Let's just go into 100%. Always good to go into 100% when you're sharpening so you can see every pixel detail. I'm just going to apply a little bit of sharpening, but not a huge amount, and I'm going to apply quite a bit of masking because there's only really a small amount of the sharp edges in this image that I would like to apply that masking, that sharpening to. Alright, I'm going to just apply a little bit of noise reduction. I wouldn't normally with ISO 50, but because I am raising the shadows just a little bit, I just want to counter the inherent noise that you would sometimes see in that scenario. Again, not a huge amount, only going up to +6. Alright, let's go back to the full image. Calibration, I'm just going to come down and with the blue primary just drop the saturation just a little bit because I just like the effect that it has on the warmer areas. It's only a very subtle effect, but just one that I do like. And I'm going to come up to split toning, and the shadows, what I'm going to do is go into the sort of orange sort of color, and I'm just going to drop that just a little bit, drop the balance down so it's just a subtle And the shadows, I'm going to go into the sort of teal blue. It's kind of interesting because I'm also going to warm up the color temperature, which is kind of countering the shadows and adding blue, but it does render a nice effect. So just a slight increase in the temperature there as well. So it may seem like I'm doing counter edits, but they do affect very specific parts of the image. You can see that there's a really nice kind of balance between blue and almost a little bit of cyan through to the green within the foliage of this image. You can really see it there, so you can see the difference in those colors, and it just provides a really nice texture of color across different spectrums. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is go to my adjustment brush, which the shortcut is K, and I'm just going to reset these ones. But what I'm going to do is just increase the exposure a tiny bit, but also drop off the highlights. Again, this could very easily be determined to be a counterproductive method, but it absolutely does provide some very interesting results. So you can see I'm just painting in just that little bit, just into that area where it's naturally has some light coming through as well. And it just helps to lead the eye into that area. I'm just going to drop the highlights a little bit more, just because I don't want it to be too contrasty. You can see that that's just really increased the brightness in that area just a little bit, as I said, where that light is naturally falling anyway, which I find kind of really interesting. Alright, we're just going to go back to our global edits, and I'm just going to drop the exposure just that little bit more. And go back to our paintbrush tool, because there's going to be a few more that I'm going to, a few more areas that I'm just going to paint a little bit of exposure into, just to bring up the texture. It's only subtle, but it definitely helps to, I guess, bring out the texture within that image. Now I'm kind of liking where this is going. It's starting to really work for me. I do like the contrast in the color. Now what I'm actually going to do now is go to the tone curve, and I'm just going to make a little bit of an unusual tone curve. I'm going to raise the shadows while simultaneously increasing contrast with a normal S curve, but then also dropping the highlights. Oops. Now you can see it's giving it a little bit of a muddy look, which I don't want to do, so I'm just going to decrease that contrast again. Just going to raise that shadow area just a little bit. There we go. Alright, so what that's done is I've just dropped the white point and raised the black point. So that just helps to further flatten the image out a little bit. But with that slight S-curve in the middle there, it's also providing a little bit more contrast to the midtones, which, as you can imagine, based on the previous edits that I've done for this image, there's quite a strong range of midtones in there already. there's not a lot of super dark areas or super bright areas. So it's just kind of an interesting approach to, as I said, raise the black point, drop the white point, which generally makes the image flatter, whilst also simultaneously adding contrast to the midtones. And you can see that that image is really starting to get to where I want it to be, which is great. All right, let's just go back into split toning. I'm just going to look at those warm tones in the highlights and the blues in the shadows, with that teal sort of look. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to experiment. I may go back to where I am at the moment, but I'm just going to experiment with dropping the vibrance and saturation overall of this image, which generally in shadow areas you're going to feel like there is a drop in saturation. So that's a global adjustment that I've just done. But then what I'm going to do is come back to my adjustment brush. I'm going to reset these. I'm going to selectively increase my saturation, and I'm going to apply that to that highlight area. Just going to slightly increase my brush here. Now you can see that that warmer sort of area for the highlights is really starting to pop out a little bit more. Which I think looks really interesting. Alright, so I'm starting to be really happy with where that image is. I'm just going to get rid of that adjustment brush and just go back to our global adjustments. I'm just going to... No, I'm happy with the contrast where it is. That's great. So really what I wanted to do with this image was to take a acceptable rainforest image on an overcast day, which, as I mentioned way back in the beginning, is absolutely the best time to photograph rainforest images. And I just wanted to give it a bit of a different look, so certainly a toned down version, but with very subtle leading in or leading the eye into the highlighted area, which is that light that's naturally occurring down onto the trail on the left-hand sort of upper part of the image. And really for me, in an image like this, or for any image where you're making, I guess, selective highlights or darker areas, is to actively work with the lighting that exists in the image already, not trying to create lighting that didn't exist and then will tend to look a little bit unreal. Now, you could certainly argue that this image doesn't look like real and it's very different to the original capture. Absolutely acknowledge that. But certainly what I've wanted to achieve or what I've wanted to do with this image is to work with the lighting that existed on the day and to just create more of a dramatic effect, which really, if you're in a rainforest with an overcast or a rainy day, this is a perfect opportunity to experiment with this type of editing approach. Now, I certainly wish that it had been a bit of a rainy day. A little bit of rain would have given a nice glisten and shine and depth to the colour in all parts of the image, which is naturally what in a rainforest water does, or rain does. But I think certainly it's come out in a way that I'm pretty happy with, so I think it works. Now, as with any image, I would normally sit on this image just a little bit further, just to kind of make sure that I'm happy with it. But for now, in the time frame that I've edited this image, I'm pretty happy with it. Certainly, if you look at the before and after, you can see that it's started as a well-captured image and a well-exposed and framed image, but nothing really too exciting. Nothing that's going to make me go, wow, that's got a really beautiful feel to it. Whereas the image on the right-hand side, you can see it just has a really beautiful, subtle low-key feel to it and a little bit mysterious, which is exactly what I wanted to go for. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope some of the techniques have been helpful. As always, any questions are welcome in the comments below. Thanks again for stopping by, and look forward to seeing you again in the future, and take care.